in our CE class that we're holding today, or this morning. So we're going to be going over some fire damage, odor removal. Obviously, it's been a huge hot topic lately, especially with all the Louisville fires and Superior fires, which we've been kind of at the forefront of. Day one, we were out there. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but that's more for the end. We'll talk about, kind of the locality of things. So we're just going to kind of brief you on pretty much everything when it comes to fire damage and odor removal. But I want to talk a little bit about just a brief on our company and kind of, what we do. So again, restoration work is not just fire damage and smoke damage, but it's water damage too. A lot of times they come hand in hand. You end up with a fire damaged home, fire department comes out, they spray it down with a bunch of stuff. It's wet, it's soaking, it smells of ash and smut. So a lot of times they come hand in hand. We will be having a water class about an hour after this, and lunch will be served in between as well. We'll have some Chipotle, I believe, coming in.
I think it's barbecue.
Or some barbecue. So some better options there for you guys. And yeah, so we're just going to try to hang out. We'll try to do some live demonstrations and try to have fun with it. But if you guys get too bored, just let me know or stand up and walk out. I don't care. Feel free to make this your home too. So again, a little bit about the class outline today. We're just going to go over some basic ways how fire can affect properties. So the different types of fires. We all are pretty familiar with the common types of fires, but we're just going to go through them, some elementary stuff, and then we'll talk about kind of the regulation that we all follow. Even though there's no real set standard for fire damage and smoke damage, they are working towards that, and there is a governing body, the IICRC, and we do follow their standards. So we'll kind of go over some of those and what that looks like to kind of clean up. And of course, here in Colorado, we do have the asbestos requirements. Even if a home was built just a few days ago, we still have to test it for asbestos, as if they haven't tested for it already. So they are pretty strict nowadays compared to how they were in the past, and also in other states as well. So again, we'll go over some of the public health tips as well. So just some ways to kind of offer some assistance to your clients in ways that they can breathe better when they're in their home, or just navigating through the process, because it's very tiring on one's nervous system. And then we'll spend some time going over the different types of equipment. As you guys can see, we've got a bunch of different fans over there. We've got a hydroxyl machine and an ozone and a thermal fogger. If you're not familiar with these things, that's what we're going to learn about today. So just kind of bear with us. We're going to get that stuff set up eventually and rock and roll. We'll have you guys hands-on with some of the equipment and show you some of the differences between them. And then so other than that, we've brought in some smut and some ash from a fireplace from Mike, our owner back there. So he was so kind to get some for us and dirty this up. So we'll show you what it looks like just to kind of treat, typical ash or smut on walls, things like that, drywall, flooring, what it looks like for carpet, is stuff salvageable? What is my stuff? What's going to happen to my stuff? So we'll get that stuff figured out and we'll go through it. And of course, talk about, the personal protection equipment that our techs have. So, not only are we going to be, going over the equipment that's going to be in the home, but we got to make sure that our guys are protected. So just kind of an overview talking about, the type of gear that you may see them in, or if your clients are calling you and they're saying, why are they wearing these big suits? And, should I be wearing a big gas mask or respirator? Our guys are in this pretty much day in and day out. A lot of homeowners aren't. So I'll kind of explain the differences of why we take the precautions, but it may not be necessary for your homeowners, or it might be necessary for your homeowners. So we'll go over health. And so the contents is something that we're going to touch on as well. Not just the structure, but I say, obviously what makes a house a home is the stuff that you fill it with, right? So a lot of the times you will have a lot of questions about contents. There's a lot of variables between that, whether or not something can be salvaged, or something can be clean, or if it's cost beneficial for that. And then what it looks like for, expensive items and, like heirlooms and things like that, things that need, a little bit more special attention. So we'll go over those things, and yeah, hope we have some fun. This is my first class. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I hope I do well and can teach you guys. So
you're doing great so far.
Thank you. All right, so like I said, elementary school, what are some things that we can think of when it comes to fire? How does a fire start, and what are some of the common causes of fire?
Has anybody in here ever experienced a fire, either one of their clients or personally, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, you want to maybe talk on it a little bit, or kind of share it?
Me?
You shook. You shook your head.
Oh, no, that's fine. I had a customer who has a detached garage. This was years ago, and they were refinishing wood, and so they had a chemical combustion between cleaning rags and wood staining material in a plastic bucket in their garage. So it caught the garage on fire.
Yeah.
Thankfully, just the house had mostly just some smoke damage because it was detached, but.
Right. But like you're saying, chemical fire, there's a lot of different aspects that can happen for chemical fires. We see, chemicals underneath sinks and stuff like that can combust and explode. Those fires are definitely a lot more intensive to clean than your typical like dry fire, which I would consider to be like your kind of like campfire, that doesn't have those chemicals that really kind of sticks and bonds to different other materials, so had that, exploded, it would have gotten all over the walls and the ceiling and maybe appliances and things like that. So, treating those types of things is a little bit different than just going in and, if you got some smoke blowing in like we did in the Marshall fires. So it was a lot of just, it was 100-mile-per-hour winds that was coupled with those fires. So, we saw a lot of debris and ash being blown into the home. But yeah, you do see the chemical fires. What are some other ones?
I had a client that thought it was a good idea to cook on, it's called a disco. It's like like pretty much an oil little thing that you can fry stuff
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
And it's supposed to be for outside. And
Supposed to be.
yeah, and it just set the whole house on fire. So
I bet it stunk too, right?
well, it was all burnt.
Yeah,
So that would be that'd be considered a protein fire, or
Yeah.
definitely, like
We're definitely cooking protein, yes.
that brings in a whole other set of variables as well.
yeah. With those types of fires, you see a lot of the fires, if you ever just kind of watch like oil burn, it just sits there. It doesn't travel too much, but there's still a lot that's going on there. And especially with protein fires, those are some of the hardest to deal with in terms of odors. So like Thanksgiving time, they got a big turkey in the oven and that happens to catch fire, and then that turkey smoke gets into the rest of the house. It's pretty extensive because of the type of porous materials that you find in a lot of the homes, what we would need to do to clean that. So again, we'll go over some of that. I know lint is a big one. Oh, you have?
That wasn't a question. It's just going to say that I had clients that bought a home that was a result of cigar smoke. And it wasn't a fire anywhere other than just in that cigar, but it so penetrated everything.
Yeah. And that's part of this course. We're going to go over odor neutralization. We get a lot. I think we get a lot of that out here. If you're a realtor, with the marijuana and the cannabis industry and stuff like that, a lot of people want to make sure that the homes are cleaned efficiently, that those deep-rooted, smells of tobacco or, cannabis, things like that are extracted. Pet odors, very common, things like that. So any more examples that you guys want to give me of some fires that you have come across? Or?
Electrical
Electrical?
wires on the outside.
Yeah.
Something sparked and set the whole unit on fire in a condo townhouse situation.
Was that like an older townhome or relatively new?
Actually, I don't think it was that old. I forget what year it was, but I don't think it was that old. It was just some kind of random, and thankfully the homeowner was there.
Yeah.
They were gone and popped in for like lunch, and so they were able to kind of get on top of it
Right.
pretty quickly from it getting. But if they weren't there, then it probably would have taken out the whole complex.
Yeah. To that point, I worked solar for a good bit right before this. I did residential door-to-door sales, and then I was on the back end for monitoring as well, helping IT kind of install the systems. And electricians would call me, and they would take pictures of the setup essentially, and I'll just say there are some nightmare scenarios out there, especially in some of the older homes. So electrical fires are very common. We see that a lot of that, especially 1920s, 30s homes, things like that. If it was somebody doing their own wiring, oftentimes can lead to fires. We see a lot of like lint causing fires as well. Like if you haven't gotten your dryers cleaned out, we'll see that can cause a lot of static buildup and kind of combust and create fires as well. So again, we'll kind of go over some things that I've got here. It's very important that you get your ducts cleaned out. We pretty much recommend it almost every 5 to 10 years, if not almost yearly, if you can get them inspected just to be sure, especially if you're doing a lot of laundry, especially if you have pets and things like that, because you can end up with a lot of backup in your pipes, stuff like that. I know nowadays, there's services where kind of people will come in with like this big like rotor gun and kind of just throw it in there and everything's coming out. You'd be surprised how much lint comes out of these ducts. We had an agent here last time. He said, he got his home built about 20 years ago, never got him cleaned out, never even had them inspected. And after this course, he ended up getting them inspected and cleaned out. And, he sent me some photos of it, and it looked pretty bad, almost to the extent of this type of buildup. So, could have been a big fire hazard for him at some point. Something to kind of consider with your clients, if they're ever concerned, about a fire in the future, just some preparation tips on lint fire. And again, you guys talked about this a little bit, some of the protein fires, right? So different types of oils will burn. You got your stovetop and appliances and things like that can catch fire. These are very common, but are often, relatively contained unless the person's not there or, it's just happened to get out of hand. But you'll end up with a good mix of ash, smoke, and smut from this. But typically it's a lot of that sticky kind of glue-like, just I don't want to call it like almost just like grease, right? That's just kind of coated on everything, which we would need to use like a chemical degrease or a degreaser with, which I'll kind of go over, how we do that. So, with protein fires too, we find that, there's a lot that comes in with like outdoor grilling as well. So, you see back porches and structures and things like that may be affected and not necessarily the home. So it's just something to keep in mind as well when you're dealing with homeowners is, hey, do you have a grill? Do you have these types of things? And do you have coverage for these areas where, spontaneous combustion may occur, right? So some more examples of appliances. Very difficult to kind of get into those appliances because, oftentimes these types of burns, because they have chemicals in them or they'll have food proteins, they'll leave like pitting or corrosion, on these types of appliances. So it's very difficult to often recover them. But if they are recoverable, that's great. And we'll be able to get them cleaned up. Typically it's wiping down, or and we may have like an ultrasonic machine which uses sound to kind of clean things off, which I'll kind of go over in a little bit. And so yeah, when it comes to chemical fires, we really do try to neutralize odor and just make sure that you guys get suited up with new appliances and things if needed. If you have kids, kids are often a variable. I call them accidental arsonists, right? Yeah, I like to play with matches and light candles when I was a kid. When I found a lighter, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. My parents took it away from me immediately. But here's some pictures of some kids playing with some fire. It's not often you come across this. You can't really predict it, right? It's accidental. But there are some things that you can kind of teach children to do. Hey, want to make sure that we're using fire in a contained environment. If it's candle, make sure that type of teaching. This isn't a course on how to teach children about fire safety. It's more on cleaning up and odor. But just some things to look out for when you are dealing with fires. You'll see a lot of accidental fires, from kids and things like that. Big one around the holidays, right? And the winter season. You got some very old space heaters right there. I don't know if anybody's got any like that anymore, but yeah, oftentimes we see a lot of space heaters, especially like the little small ones that you put up underneath like your office desk, those, I mean, if they're poorly made, I mean, we're seeing those, spark up left and right. There's warnings all over the labels, to make sure that you guys, follow that correctly. I don't really like using these, but, in homes, we often see, because it's from a single source in the room, relatively contained, unless it's, people aren't in the home, they're just leaving them running all day long. Yeah. We got campfires, wildfires, people not putting out their fire pits, things like that. You can end up with some structure damage from, light bulbs, really old light, fixtures like up in the ceilings of garages that people really don't pay attention to. These are just some things that you may see. And then, of course, Christmas lights, right? Everybody loves to kind of do their own rigging when it comes to Christmas lights. And oftentimes that can create an overload on the electrical system, and you can end up with electrical fires out of that. So again, we're just talking about some general ways fires happen and get started. And you guys are pretty familiar with that being in, the type of work that you guys do. So some fire tips, just a little bit. Obviously these are some things that you can give to your clients. You want to make sure that if a wildfire happens, like we had kind of like in Marshall fires, some advice is close all your windows, doors, and vents, right? That was a big thing that I noticed because I live in Louisville, so I had to evacuate for all those fires, and it was very real for me. All my neighbors, were doing the same thing, and people were rushing out of their homes with like kids in their hand and leaving the doors wide open. I mean, we had, 100-mile-per-hour winds blowing in ash. You really couldn't even open your eyes if you were in like Louisville Superior without getting stuff all in it. So when I was going out the next day and inspecting homes, it was crazy to see the differences between, people that were going in and out and people that hadn't even been in the home. Because of, just having those windows open, having those doors open, things like that. So one of the first things is if you guys, have a client that's getting ready to have a fire, they're like calling you, hey, there's a fire, a few minutes down, what do I do? Here's some tips that you can kind of give them. Just, close all your windows and vents. Of course, kind of preemptive to that is make sure there's a smoke detector, you guys hear that alarm. That's all common. Have a go kit, have some supplies ready. I say at least 3 days worth of supplies ready. And then of course, work with you guys to hopefully get them into a place, whatever supplies that they may need. But I typically say 3 days just to be able to get you a weekend somewhere, or, just kind of get your stuff figured out while you're dealing with the situation. Food, blankets, clothing, medicine, prescriptions, things like that. Always good to just kind of make sure that your agents or your clients are, having something on hand. Plan an escape route. So that's not just in the home, but also in the neighborhood, which is something I wish I did, because as soon as I got in my car and I was like, all right, we're getting out of here, hit traffic. And I was in traffic and I was just watching homes burn on the side of the street, and, I didn't have an evac route. I was looking online trying to figure out where to go, and people were saying, oh no, this street's closed and this street's closed, and I just didn't have a plan. I was very unaware of what to do, and so I know in the future I'm going to have a plan, and I definitely recommend anybody to have a plan, because especially in the state of Colorado, I think I was looking at a statistic from Arvada Fire that said that they had 69,000 calls just last year. So a lot. Maybe not all fires, right? But emergency situations that could, demand them to come out. So, radio in, make sure you're staying tuned. Facebook's a good resource. I know a lot of the local counties are utilizing that. Twitter's a good resource. A lot of local counties are utilizing that. I know they're updating the broadcast systems and stuff. I hear them doing warning and everything. So, hopefully you're in a community that you feel safe in. But if not, make sure you have a plan. So. All right, and again, some little brief on what we did and talked about some of the fires. Now, this is kind of what you can do, or to the fire, not necessarily cleaning it, but for combustible woods and stuff like that, the best method is just by cooling it down. For flammable liquids, take it on by smothering it. For flammable gases, you want to starve the fire. Combustible metals, you got to actually, that one's a tough one because you do have to get rid of kind of the chemical that's supplying the fire, and oftentimes that chemical's on fire. So that one is a tough one, but definitely something that can be suppressed in certain circumstances. And then electrical hazards, you want to cover those up. If you got a big cheap $5 power strip from Walmart, you plug every single TV you got in the house into it, it catches fire. You just want to kind of cover it up and cool it off. And then cooking oils and fats, same thing, cover it up. You end up doing this and sliding it over. It's going to end up basically just taking that oil that's on fire and spreading it. So tossing something over it, weighted, let it be. That's the best way to do it. So again, just some fire awareness. This course isn't really on that, but some just general tips. All right, so again, there's not really a set standard for fire. And I kind of want to ask you guys the same thing. Do you guys have a set standard when it comes to fire damage? Do you have any sort of protocol that you look for that restoration companies are following or anything like that when you look at a fire restoration company?
I think legitimate and actually having certifications, having I guess I look at it more on like a roof side when you get your door knockers versus, you can't trust them versus companies that are established and have relationships and have the certifications, know the city codes.
Yeah. So how do you find out, do you like request them or do you vet those types of, just vet them? Okay. So in our world, like I said, there's no real set standard. Some people, there can be your Bobs in a truck doing fire restoration. And they may have taken this course, they may not have, the IICRC, but they could go to a homeowner and offer them services, and that homeowner may say, great, we're going to go with them and call you guys up, and you might not be any the wiser as to what the situation is or how it's going to be handled, or if it's going to be handled correctly. Some of the things in the Marshall fires that we saw was a wide variety of services being offered. A lot of homeowners asking tons of questions. Well, these people are offering this and these people are offering this, and at the end of the day, it's the client that's going to be living the home. Those are the people that are going to be dealing with it, and it's their crisis. It's not yours. So you really got to make sure that you know what you're doing, and kind of all the pieces to the puzzle, because there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to bringing a home back to a livable condition and a safe condition. So what we do is we actually send all of our technicians to the IICRC, and I highly recommend any restoration company guys choose to, this is the governing body that you guys want to look at to see if they, if they have techs that go to this and are certified in this, because it's great. They really teach us, how to procedurally go through it, and I'll go over again some of that stuff today about what we do, and then I'll kind of give the layman's terms of it. But a fire and smoke damage restoration tech, or an FSRT tech, basically knows how to cover scoping, mitigation, cleaning, deodorization, subrogation, spoliation, documentation. So a lot of it really that the fire tech kind of goes into and has to make sure that he's or she is kind of looking at and kind of aware of. If you just go into a home and you see some ash on the wall and you're like, all right, cool, there's some ash on the wall here, but and the fire may have happened here, but let's say there's an air vent above and that leads over into the bathroom or into the floor or another room. A certified fire tech will know, okay, well, I need to track that, go into the other room and make sure there's no other damage, in the other room, which we may find, some ash blowback or, some evidence of that in other ventilating areas. So just knowing what to look for is a big thing, right? I know when I was doing a lot of Marshall fires at first, because it was so different between each home, I was like, do I know what I'm looking for? So definitely, as if you can try to find restoration companies or, technicians that are certified, that have this FSRT certification, you should know that they'll properly document, they'll know what to look for, and they'll know kind of how to empathize with the clients and so forth to kind of give them, the services that are needed. So, that's kind of a little bit about that, but we also have another certification that is more on the odor side of things, because oftentimes just cleaning something up is one thing, but making sure that there's no odors coming from it or mold coming from it or any type of bacterial growth in the future coming from it is definitely important. So an OCT or an odor control technician basically covers the olfaction, the nasal odors there, or nasal odors there, and has the equipment and the options to be able to address that. So there's a lot when it comes to that. We deal with some bio cases as well, where people may have overflowed a commercial bathroom or something like that we'll have to deal with. Those things that are more towards the mold side of things, but today we'll probably be mostly talking about smoke odors, chemical odors from the like different types of food burning and stuff like that, proteins burning, and so on. So just some general tips. All right, any questions so far about certifications or anything like that, what to look for when you're checking out a technician? Okay. So an uneducated technician can definitely cause more damage than the fire odor. With a lot of the fires technicians, like I said, if they don't take the course, they may say, oh, I'll know how to figure this out. We just need to wipe this down with a rag, and we just need to use soap and water here, or you really want to make sure that they know what they're doing, because at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of cases where technicians will come in, they'll start just ripping up carpet. Oh, there's ash and soot in this carpet, it's got to go, without approvals from insurance, without having that sort of conversation, but just thinking that what is needed to be done. So I always say if a technician is trying to rush through the process, it's probably not the best idea, because there are a lot of things that we need to handle on the front end, conversations with agents, the clients, making sure that the estimates are approved, making sure that the scope of work is accurate, things like that. So an uneducated technician is probably just going to try to be, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to push this through. We'll be done in 4 hours. And then you guys will be getting calls a week later saying my house still stinks. He used the rag on my wall and it looks like that. There's a bunch of scratches. He smeared a bunch of the ash and then didn't really know how to take care of that because it was a food fire. So again, that's just kind of spreading a lot of the damage that we're trying to mitigate. And yeah, especially in Colorado, we'll touch a little bit more on asbestos. Regulation 8 requires us to test. If it's more than a 3-foot square area of drywall, anything that can be ACM or asbestos containing material. So we see tiling, a lot of the joint compound and things like that, we'll have to test. A lot of people think it's oh, well, my home was built 2000 or whatever. Well, great, it doesn't have lead, but it may still contain asbestos. We import asbestos in. It can't really be made in the United States, but it can be imported, so that's considered safe asbestos. And asbestos isn't something that I think people should be, super crazy about. Oh no, I got asbestos in my home, I can't live in my home. It's only when it becomes friable when it's an issue. So when we go in and we have a fire damage, we've got a section of drywall that needs to be cut out because it's non-recoverable, non-salvageable. We'll have to test it first. And that's more for the safety of our guys, because they are day in, day out breathing this stuff in. Your homeowners really aren't, So we do make sure that, that testing is done. They have started putting in pretty high fines for people who haven't been done testing. So if you guys see one restoration company go out They did some demo. Maybe another company comes in, construction company comes in, and they come in and they do the testing for ACM, and that first company didn't. Well, that first company and that second company that came in can be liable for that asbestos, and the fees are quite high. So definitely when you're looking at a restoration company, just make sure that they're familiar with the local laws, that they do the testing, and that way you guys aren't ending up with like legal issues in the future. Also, continued education. So the IICRC is again coming up with some standards for fire damage, and like a set broad standard. And I'm hoping that everybody can kind of get on the same page and offer continued education, keep up to date with the latest technology, the different types of equipment and so forth. I know here, everything that we have is within the past 4 years. A lot of the equipment that we have is brand new because of the Marshall fires. We had to order a bunch of it. So you guys may find a lot of restoration companies out here may be a little bit more suited for fires because of what happened. But yeah, just check their equipment, make sure they're not just, again, walking around with like a sponge and a rag, that they actually have the proper antimicrobial degreaser or thermal fogger or HEPA-vac, an air scrubber, some of the things that we'll talk about. But
Are you guys just in Colorado?
so Restoration One is a franchise. It's all over the United States, but we're family owned here in Colorado. You'll find, I think, probably 3 or 4 other restoration companies in this area, Restoration One in this area. Central Denver is one. And then we've got an office down in Colorado Springs as well, a couple offices down there. We'll hopefully, I know this is kind of a small area, but we'll hopefully be expanding within the next year and do an office out in Aurora as well. Maybe, I don't know, hopefully I'll be able to do these classes online too, so if you don't want to come out and hang out, we'll be able to kind of offer that. But continued education is definitely important. I try to make sure that we're up to date with the latest equipment, that I know what I'm talking about, and that I'm reading, any of the news that is coming out of the ICCRC. So I just, make sure that they know what they're talking about. Okay. So we'll get into how do we deal with it, right? So if a home was exposed to smoke and ash, we basically just want to do several things. It's inspection, cleaning, treatment, and then in some cases testing to make sure that we did all 3 of those correctly. And those are specific cases, but at the end of the day, it is the client that's going to be dealing with the aftermath. So we just want to make sure that a client understands, hey, there's step-by-step process for this. There's going to be an inspection. We're going to get approvals. We'll do the documentation. Then we'll go into the cleaning, whatever's necessary for the scope of work. And then we'll make sure that it's, treated properly and tested afterwards, that there's no contaminants. Okay, so when it comes to inspections, of course, the main purpose is to verify damage. I look for evidence of penetration into the home. If it's an outdoor fire that's gotten into the home, any sort of evidence that I can find, smoke, ash, the source, document, take tons of pictures. There's 3D modeling out nowadays where you can, if you're ever on like Zillow looking for houses and stuff, you can kind of get the 3D tour. A lot of restoration companies are using 3D imaging. I know we do. So, documentation is very important because there are so many different companies that are going to be hands-on typically. There's the insurance agents, there's the insurance adjusters, there's the general contractor that may be doing the rebuild, there could be an electrician, there could be all these different people, and if you're the first person out there as a fire safety tech, you want everything documented. It's just the most important thing. So how can you verify if there's smut and ash? I mean, it's pretty noticeable it's there. The homeowner said there was a fire, but how can you physically verify it?
Use your nose.
Use your nose, yeah. Odors, definitely one. We use something called a dry sponge or a chem sponge. Have you guys heard of those? Yep. So a dry sponge is a specially made sponge made out of rubber. Basically, rubber is a carbon-based material that is similar to, you know, a lot of the particulate coming out of a fire, carbon-based fire, right? So because it's sharing the same molecular compound, it sticks to it. So chem sponges or dry sponges, I don't know really why they call them chem sponges because there's not a chemical that they're treated with. I guess maybe it just sounds fancier because, yeah, you know, these are specifically for fire. And it's only really just because of how easy it is to demonstrate, oh, this is coming off, this is black, this is carbon-based, this is actually ash and smut, and not dust. You know, because dust, the difference between dust and ash and smut is dust is, it's just particulate. I mean, it's below typically like 0.6 microns, and it doesn't smear, it just kind of, you know, I would say explodes or combusts. So you just don't deal with, you know, a whole lot of dust sticking to those dry sponges. It's mainly just ash and smut. So I should have a dry sponge. Just getting, yep, thanks, sir.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I didn't want to hit anyone with it.
I ain't got hops like I used to, man. All right, so yeah, these are the dry sponges here. You kind of just take them apart. And I do have some ash and smut up here that we kind of smeared up. Does anybody want to kind of just do a little wipe down and see what comes off? No?
Yep, I will.
You will?
Yep.
Cool, all right.
I'll be the volunteer.
Cool, if you wasn't, I was gonna volunteer myself,
What is it?
so.
I'll volunteer as tribute.
All right, I'm just gonna give you no direction and see how you do it, and then I'll.
On the floor, you said?
Well, let's start top down. And
Up here too?
I would start from the wall and then kind of
here?
scrape down. Yeah, see if you get any ash or smut coming off on that. See how it's not really noticeable on the wall?
It's kind of like a magic eraser.
Yep. And you want to just, so how we do it is broad strokes down. Yeah, just like that. That way you're not smearing or scratching. Like I said, an uneducated technician can cause more damage. I was up here scratching it earlier with a rag, you know.
What are you saying?
Well, you're getting educated, live hands-on, so.
You can do the floor?
Well, you can, but take a look at the rag. So see how it's already showing that kind of gray, smut, ashy color. That's just really lifting off that. Now, when it comes to utilizing a dry sponge in the cleaning process, we do utilize this in the cleaning process as well, but it's really just to kind of, almost like what she's doing, just make sure all of that really loose ash and material is lifted up, and we can kind of get rid of it.
Is it kind of like a magic eraser a little bit?
I wish it was, because that would make our jobs a lot easier, but it's really just for verification, just to show homeowners, hey, you definitely got ash, that's not dust, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you guys can kind of see, you know, how much is lifted up off that.
The sponges come in handy. They're a great quantifier when there is soot away from the source.
Yeah. You guys
That
want
usually
to touch it?
happens, you know. Restorers will go out there, contractors will go out there, and of course they're going right to the kitchen because they can see it all. But then, you know, you have to take the time to at least go as further back as possible where the air vents are, because it travels through the vents, and you can use the dry sponges basically testing, pre-testing, see if there's any soot coverage. Because sometimes you can't see soot to the naked eye. And the last thing you want to do is wipe your hand on it with your oils, because now you stain the wall. So that sponge comes in handy to get that soot off. One less approach the contractor. Now I don't have to wet wash theoretically. I can dry sponge and get that surface soot off. You know, some contractors will use to an extent. So, you know, as you see, it starts to get full of soot. They're basically, guys, these are 100,000 rubber bands compressed into a square. Okay, that's basically what it is. It's just copious amounts of rubber compressed. So you can use it one side, left side, right side, but when it gets jet black or gray, you chuck them.
Yep.
You know, they're not washable. Not like a chem sponge. I mean, excuse me, like a Arm & Hammer dry sponge. Those are a little bit different. Those are actually made of a chemical that disintegrates as you continue to wipe.
Yeah, that's like your magic eraser.
Smaller and smaller. These won't get smaller. They'll just get packed and packed and packed full of soot, to the point where if you try to reuse it, you'll dirty an environment. And now you're smearing. It's like, you know what? Let's get rid of this. Go into the next one. But this is generally for light smoke removal.
Right.
You know, light. And it also has to be on a certain type of wall surface. Because if you try to use one of these sponges on an oil-based wall, you'll just smear it. These are made for flat latex surfaces, so pretty simple. The semi-glosses, the oil-based, wet wash. That's the easiest way to clean it.
Yep.
Sorry, sir.
You're good, brother. I appreciate it. But yeah, to his point, dry surfaces, and then we have wet washes for things that have more of a laminate type surface that's not as porous, right? So again, documentation is absolutely key to ensure a smooth process for the client, and utilizing the dry sponge, taking as much evidence of the contaminant as possible is absolutely, again, paramount. And again, they'll know where to look. For a long time, when we were in the Marshall fires, we were talking to some restoration companies that were like, I didn't even look in the attic. I didn't even look in the crawl space. I didn't even check their fresh air intake. So these are some things that you definitely want to make sure that, a proper technician knows. It's like, hey, their attics may, in fact, the insulation in the home may be affected. And that's one of the biggest things that we did see in the Marshall fires was a lot of that insulation was because of the gable vents. And, depending on the direction of the home, you were just seeing tons of debris being blown. I mean, I saw chunks about this big in people's insulation. So definitely something to keep in mind. And then, you may see them take measurements or do sketches. I highly recommend 3D imaging when you can. Some, folks may just do a little pad sketch with, a little draw out, but measurements are very important, especially in your world, because a 8 by 10 space versus a 12 by 15 space, well, what does that mean for you guys? A bigger bill, right? So an improperly trained technician is probably not going to do the right documentation for that. So again, what we do is the 3D imaging, and I'll kind of show some examples of that. This is a DocuSketch tool, very neat because it does the 360 photo and allows us to kind of be there when you're not there. I take this from pretty much every job that I do. So here is an example. Is this the tour mode right here?
I think you can just...
Kind of zoom around?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with kind of how this works. You just have this full 360 shot, but this allows adjusters, public adjusters, estimators, really figure out exactly what the bill is going to come to, because they can see, oh, well, there's contents right here. There's a big couch right here that needs to be moved. Well, is this going to be packed out? How do we take care of this? Or, oh, there's a bunch of Christmas toys or something laying all over the place. Well, of course, this project is going to take a little bit longer. There may be some more itemization. Just having your eyes on it, because people may forget things on the phone when they call you, or may not realize what may need to be needed for the proper scope of work. So if you can make sure that your techs are doing proper documentation, you'll be able to better assist your clients at the end of the day, because you'll know exactly what they're dealing with.
That camera makes our stuff close too, so it's very accurate. So it makes it very easy for us to run an estimate that's very accurate, and the insured also has the same measurements.
Yeah, with this specifically, we send this to their group, and they.
So it creates a DSX, and you can download it into Xactimate, and it'll pop up with a sketch of everything.
The same software that adjusters use, this can be shared directly with them, save them a ton of time in their process. And we've gotten some great feedback with that tool as a whole.
Have you guys, when some of the fires that you did you get documentation to this extent, like 3D imaging and everything?
Okay.
No, it was probably for that. So
Probably. Okay.
yeah, I think our fire was probably about 6 years ago.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
How new is that technology?
I'm sorry.
How new is that technology?
DocuSketch? I would say within the past 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's become a lot more affordable in the past probably 3 or 4 years. It used to cost over $1,000 to get a file like that through some of the softwares that are really geared more towards like full-scale construction projects. This is definitely great for industries like restoration. both fire and water, just because it provides so much information. But the cost is relatively minimal, you know, $40, $50 for a file in comparison to what it used to cost.
Yeah. So have you looked through those files and ever noticed just anything out of the ordinary when you're dealing with that?
Usually that stuff goes straight to the adjusters, you know, at the
Oh, okay.
agent level. We don't
You don't really check it out?
look at that stuff often.
Cool. All right. Any adjusters in here? No? All right. Mostly agents? Realtors? Okay. Gotcha. All right. So I'll just show some examples. You know, again, just documentation. Some pictures, right? Anything that you can show to just show the extent of it, you know, the room of it. I like to, you know, go outwards in. Pictures of the framing, the outdoor area, and then centralize in on the smoke and the ash and the actual detail there.
Sometimes it could involve pictures of houses next door as well, just to show the proximity, you know?
Yep.
Especially in the Louisville and Superior or the Marshall situation, you know, there's a lot of homes where it could be right next to 6 or 8 homes that were complete losses. So just a lot of times showing that proximity is good.
Yep. So again, just some pictures. This is like a front entryway that we saw. Again, actually, you can kind of tell from that picture that there's a lot of ash on that wall, right? So, hey, that's the front entryway of a home. You know, a good picture there, some ash on the wall. And of course, notating any specificities that an adjuster may request. You know, oftentimes you see your adjusters go out to the claims, or is it adjusters kind of hang out and?
Pretty much it's all virtual anymore.
Yeah.
Frankly, ever since COVID, adjusters don't go out much. That's what I'm seeing.
You've seen it transition a lot more to virtual or
Yeah.
to just looking through
Like I
documentation?
say, since COVID, it's just like, yeah, we don't go out anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say we used to see like an 80-20 split towards the going to the properties, and now it's flip-flopped, like you're saying, more or less in the favor of doing things virtually.
Yep. Yeah. So, you know, oftentimes in the restoration world, an adjuster loves to get their hands on. I guess nowadays it's pretty 50-50. But we did see a lot in the Marshall fires, at least some adjusters did come out. And oftentimes the adjusters want to make sure that no mitigation is, you know, started until they're absolutely sure that things are going to be covered, or, you know, they have their eyes on it. So, you know, again, proper documentation. So if they're not going out, they're sitting behind a desk somewhere, you can give them everything that they need. All right, so after the inspection and documentation is done, and you've empathized with the client, you know, you've made sure that the client wants to move forward, all that great stuff, they're ready to start the mitigation. Well, what's the first step to the mitigation? Well, we need to protect what's not already damaged is the first step. So properly setting containment and protecting unaffected areas is normally the first step, so that less damage to the structure and contents it happens, and that's obviously best for everybody involved. Personal protection equipment, or in your world you may see it as PPE. So that's again what our technicians are going to be wearing to protect themselves and so forth. And then of course, typically day one is setting equipment such as like an air scrubber, you know, just to start filtrating that air, making sure that it's good. But again, typically day one is just setting the containment of the area. You also find that if any bit of the structure in the home is deemed to be non-salvageable, a rebuild project may be in order. Rebuild project is just a little bit different than a mitigation project. They kind of go hand in hand, but you know, during your inspection, when you're going through and you're saying, okay, well, you know, this piece of drywall has been burnt up, you know, we can demo it. The demo will be part of the mitigation, but putting it back together is typically a set estimate. You might have a GC, or you might have the restoration company, you know, have a sister company do this, but they do go hand in hand. Just know that the rebuild part of things, putting things back together, is separate from the demolition. Here's some pictures of proper containment. So you want to make sure that you are containing any doorways, windows, things like that with these nice layers of plastic. You've got zipper locked, everything's taped and sealed. And obviously you want to make sure that this is not just on doorways and windows, but on flooring that technicians are going to be walking in and out of the home. You're not scratching stuff up, as you're coming in and out of the home, lugging equipment, anywhere equipment is set, layer of protection is needed. And then of course, with like a lot of like the attic blowback, or if you're doing duct cleaning, that's going to blow dust all in your home, and all over your clothes and fabrics. So even setting containment over personal property is often paramount as well. So that's day one, is when we start mitigation. Mike or a technician, a good fire certified tech will not immediately just start ripping stuff up and throwing stuff into a dumpster. They'll contain the areas that have been unaffected so they're not doing more damage to the home. All right, so personal protective equipment. We've got the white jumpsuits that you're familiar with seeing, and we've also got yellow Tyvek suits. For most dry fires, you're going to see white suits, or your clients may see white suits. For chemical fires, things like that we may not necessarily know what we're dealing with, we're going to go yellow suits. We're going to maybe treat it as a category 3. Now the difference between a yellow suit and a white suit is the breathability of the suit, and essentially yellow suits don't allow any penetration of liquids and things like that, which you really don't want to be dealing with when you're dealing with chemicals from a fire, or in his case water damage, sewage and stuff like that, right? Mold. But if your clients call you, yeah, they're in a bunch of white suits and they're getting stuff cleaned out, it's probably not a chemical fire. It'll likely be a dry fire at that point. So our guys can breathe a little bit better, and we do have some of those suits right here.
Anybody want to put a suit on?
Anybody want to sweat a little bit? No? Okay, because the yellow ones are sweaty. Like, they don't let air out or in, but these are a little bit more breathable. They're very light. Again, there's some pictures of our guys in them. I probably won't hop in this right now, but the type of material is just very thin and very, I would almost say kind of like silk-like compared to this nice, almost like hard fabric here.
Pass it around.
Yeah. Here, pass that around
You
too.
want to put it on, but we'll pass it around so everyone can at least see and feel the differences between the two. Oftentimes, especially when our guys are in the yellow suits, especially when they're in crawl spaces or attics or places that are confined spaces, they have to take breaks or rotate every 15 or 20 minutes or so, just because you don't want to have heat exhaustion or other, problems. You want to keep workers safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you've ever heard clients complain about taking breaks or things like that, especially if guys are suited up, that would be the reasoning why that would be.
Yeah, you guys are looking at, I know you said adjusters normally look at the file, but if you're looking at the scope and they got like 30 of those yellow little, coverings, that's probably needed. If it's a chemical fire, if it's, some sort of, like if they're dealing with mold or even asbestos, things like that, those are required, so. Yep, and they are very uncomfortable. Like I said, about 30-minute break every so often, so.
Vacuums inside for the sweat.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. It'd come with like a little air vent and blow it up,
To have like a negative air for your suit.
Yeah. Get the chamber. Does anybody need to take a break?
Yeah,
We're
let's
gonna.
take a 5-minute break, even if it's just to stand up, stretch your legs, that type of thing. Yeah, if you need any water or drinks, we have some in the fridge as well as in the back. Just to give them somewhat of a break.
Yeah, it's been an hour.
Man, that AC works. Boy, it's cranking it. It's because Mike got it working finally. I was turning it on in there. I was wondering why it wasn't coming on.
I mean, I'm still sweaty, so it's just me. Am I doing all right?
Yeah, you're doing great.
You're welcome.
You're doing a very good job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wes, do you know there's no
So I
air
think it's
conditioning
like,
in the shop?
like, I
There
know
is.
that they
Mike,
have
turn it on.
preferences.
Oh,
But-
so you can turn it up there?
I guess it's
Yeah.
important to.
John said the content and everything is great, just a little bit too relaxed, give a little more energy,
Confirm,
you know.
because they don't all carry
And my one piece of feedback is sometimes you're staring
I
at
get
the
it, I
screen.
get it, that makes sense.
Remember to look
So
at
they're
them and
gonna
talk to
do
them.
whatever they have.
'Cause it might be hard to hear you.
I get it.
I don't know because I'm not in the back.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get it.
I'm cool. Appreciate it.
But content, everything, you know, everything's perfect. Just yeah, just maybe raise your volume 2 degrees.
Okay.
We're gonna take it and move